Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name is Renee Lavallee McKenna. I'm a therapist, shamanic healer, and parent. And I'm here with Shawn Murphy, who's also a parent, a spiritual consultant, and author of the 4-part series, Torn Between Two Worlds. And the last book in this series highlights what we're going to talk about in our series on priorities in child rearing or spiritual parenting. And this is the first of a 10-part series. And there are 10 priorities or principles that Shawn's introduced me to. And we're going to go over the first one today, which is truth over harmony. So welcome, Shawn. It's great to see you again.
It's a pleasure to be here today, Renee. And the other 10 priorities are after truth over harmony, principles over rules, attitude over aptitude, setting high expectations and letting go of the outcome, value success and failure, allow obstacles to become opportunities, taking hold and letting go, creating a character culture, humility to ask for help and receive help. And the final one, inspiration is job one.
Nice. And so today we're going to talk about truth over harmony, which I said I just had a little bit of experience with last night. And why don't you talk about your perspective on truth over harmony, Shawn?
Well, I think it's a very important topic right now. You know, we're living in a post-truth era. And the first part of trying to live in an environment with we're rewarding truth over harmony is first helping our children understand what truth is and to, be curious and search for truth in a world that has a lot of distraction in it. That the one truth that Sir Ken Robinson talks about in his work is, as a parent, there's no way that we can imagine the future that our children will live in. So how can we best support them to be successful in that future that we don't understand? And a lot of this is about truth over harmony. And, in our family, do we just push problems to the side and we don't talk about them, or do we deal with the problems and talk about the truths underlying those problems? And I think it's a great opportunity when you're pursuing this truth over harmony is, to allow everybody in the family to discover their own truths, discover what they believe in, what their strengths are, and then share that with the other members of the family. And by doing that, we can gain respect for people who are different than ourselves. And that's a very powerful tool as we get older, dealing with people who are different and valuing the difference that they bring to the table. As a spiritual teacher, I teach about reincarnation and the consequences of reincarnation. And that is that we come into this life with gifts that are unique gifts, and we're unique individuals. And as a parent, we can help our children to discover what those gifts are, and helping them find what their truth is, what their purpose is in life. And this way, by helping them find their truth, find their purpose, they can gain self-confidence because they know who they are before they have to go out in the world and try and let the world decide who they are. So they know their truth. They know who they are. And I guess the interesting thing about searching for truth within your family and your family members is it helps us become curious and asking questions. One of the things that I see a lot of my friends do is they try and tell their children how they should feel. And that's a very strong personal truth that this child has. They're sad for a reason. And it's important as a parent to try and understand what made them sad and to be curious about it. Because I lose credibility with my child if I tell my child they shouldn't be sad, when in fact they are. And this is a way that we help our children grow with their emotional intelligence when they're young, help them to define what it is that made them sad and help them understand their feelings better. Those are the kind of truths that I think are very important in a family to work on and to discover, especially before they get into school and then get confused again.
So this really brings us right to our own internal relationship with truth over harmony within ourselves and emotional honesty. And because it is an opportunity as a parent to reparent ourselves. I know it was for me. I had my children at 39 and 41, right? Just slid right under that guardrail right before menopause. And I never even wanted to have kids because I didn't like being a kid. And I didn't like the way my parents raised me. I thought being a kid was terrible. I didn't want to impose that on anyone else. But then circumstances revealed, and having children who are now 18 and 20 has been one of the most fulfilling, life-changing thing that's happened for me. And this idea of truth over harmony has been a real guiding principle for me and a growing edge. And I think it is for all of us, right? Because first we have to be willing to look inside ourselves we can talk about external truths and we can talk about internal truths. And discerning external truths, I think, is a slightly different conversation. Again, in this media rich culture that we're in right now, different people's perspectives and what is true and what is not true. That's a whole complexity because each person's perspective, something might feel, or they might believe that it's true from their perspective and it might be untrue from another perspective. So that's a different conversation. But internal truths and actually internal truths as well can shift, right? You talk about like how I feel, depending on my perspective on things, can really shift how I feel about them, whether I take something personally and feel attacked, whether I'm afraid to share something because it might cause disruption or upset the other person. And this is that the dedication to truth over harmony is a willingness to be uncomfortable. It's a willingness to go outside of keeping everything nice, that's the house I grew up in. We talked about nothing. There was no violence in my house, but there was no passion in my house either. And there was really not, it was kind of like tumbleweeds blowing through the house of nothing. And I'm a super emotional person. And my mother actually said to me at one time, I was born C-section. She said, if I didn't have a scar on my belly, I wouldn't believe that you came from me because we're so different, right? And so she said lots of nice things like that to me. So, which is why I'm a good therapist. But so the dedication to truth over harmony for me really starts with another spiritual principle, which is that there's value in truth. And that truth is, for me, how it's the higher resonance. It's how, if you use the word God, it's how God works through us. It's through our own individual truths, and that the truth is the highest good for everyone involved. Or, my own experience is that, quote unquote, the truth comes out in the long run anyway, having been involved with many people who were dedicated to not telling the truth at different times. And I myself had been a practiced liar when I was in my addiction, because I didn't believe the truth would care for me. I didn't believe I could get what I needed or what I wanted if I was honest. And that, I think a lot of people feel that way deep inside. That if I tell the truth or reveal who I really am or express what I most deeply want, that I'll be disappointed, I'll be left hopeless and hurting, as opposed to the opposite, which I think we've both experienced, which is that the truth really does set us free. And the truth is the path to connecting with higher consciousness and aligning ourselves with the larger system that has our highest good in mind. But the gap between that higher system, and I'm not talking about government, I'm not talking about even families, I'm talking the higher system of like the divine nature of the universe that created us and gave us these gifts and challenges that we each have to work through, and to be able to align ourselves with that deeper truth takes tremendous courage. That's been my experience, because it always calls me, not maybe always, but a lot of the time it calls me outside my comfort zone. And a lot of us don't like being uncomfortable, and especially if we don't believe that it's in service of a greater good.
Well, yes. I mean, I was confronted with that very early in my daughter's life. She turned out to be completely opposite of who I am. And so I was pushed outside of my comfort zone of how can I best be a father to somebody who I really don't understand. I still don't understand how she does math. I'm an engineer, she's not, but she does math in a way that I don't understand, and I accept that's her truth. I mean, it works for her, and I still don't understand it. But there's many things like that I had to be confronted with during the early days, and that's what got me interested in all these different alternative ways of learning, and came across these great teachers in the area of learning, which have helped me a lot, is becoming a very good parent who's helping others to say their truth and to live in their truth. Because if you could do that, then you're authentic. And authenticity is what you need in a long-term relationship if you're going to go on in this world. As you just said, you can't be lying all the time. You need to be authentic. And once you're authentic to yourself, I believe that gives us much more strength in being resilient. Because the world can collapse around you, but if you know who you are, you don't have to collapse inside of you. If you don't know who you are and the world collapses, you collapse with it.
So I have a slightly different paradigm in the idea of like who I am or who I'm not, or who my children are. And I do want to say, for me, I've come to understand it's kind of like two basic child rearing perspectives. And one is that the child is kind of a blank slate, or they're kind of an unruly thing, and they need to be fit into a mold in order to be successful, that we need to teach them and train them and form them. And that's an old school model of how to rear a child, that this is the right thing to do, and you adhere to this, and then you're going to be successful in the world. And there's value to some of that, certainly. And then the other, which is where I think we agree on, which is that the child comes with their own gifts and talents and challenges and their own path through the world that I may never understand. And my job is to help them to be able to live their own life journey as effectively and deeply and hopefully fulfillingly as possible, even if it's completely different than mine. And it usually is. Not always, but and so this idea for me, I had an unruly dog. I actually moved into with my boyfriend, and he had an unruly dog. And so we had to get a dog trainer because the dog had never been socialized appropriately. And it was a Rottweiler, right?
Oh, yeah.
And one of the things I learned a lovely dog, but not the kind of dog you can have being unruly out in the world. And so one of the things I learned in dog training was that dog training is really people training. And you train, and I think it's the same thing. A lot of times we focus on the child and we want the child to do this and we want the child to do that and we want the child to be this way. A lot of times in parenting, when I'm in angst, it's because I want my kid to have a certain experience and they're not having that. And really good parenting, deep parenting, even aside from good parenting, I'd like to call it deep or effective parenting, because I don't know what good is, but is parent training. That it's really about how do we be the kind of people that really we want our children to mimic. That's, do what I do, not what I say. And so for me, this truth over harmony really, because we can easily focus on others. I mean, that's one of the things that is a perpetual challenge as a human in general, is that we want to change the other people so that we're more comfortable. And really the most effective thing we can do to change others. And parenting is probably the place that this is the most poignant there, and in intimate relationships. If I want change, I need to create the change within myself first. And so how do I grow in truth over harmony? And then model that for my kids rather than just trying to teach it to them if I'm not applying it in my own life.
Yes. Yeah, that is very true. And to have these deep discussions with your children, and I found the most effective ones was when I told my truths of my failures in my life, and those were the strongest ones. And a lot of times parents will avoid talking about failure, but that's a truth also. It's one that we can learn from, or we can repeat it.
Well, even I have to say, in my experience now, the paradigm of success and failure, I kind of don't really use that anymore. I really look at it that we're having an experience here and we have a series of experiences here, because I think the success failure model that's really certainly highly perpetrated through school, right? And it's all about, at least as in school and in a lot of work circumstances, it's about pleasing other people. It's about knowing what the teacher wants. And if you give the teacher what they want, then you get an A, and that makes you successful. Even if you don't agree with it, or you don't believe in it, or you think it's dumb, which my kids have both expressed to me at different times. They've thought all of those things in classes. And I think, for myself, particularly as a 12-step person, who was faced really in some ways with my own demise if I didn't tell the truth about some really kind of horrific stuff with drug and alcohol abuse. And I was a street criminal and all kinds of crazy stuff. So what I found from that was this principle that the truth will set me free. And not only will the truth set me free, but it actually can heal other people. Like the woman who helped me to get sober was a street prostitute and had been in prison. And she was also a writer and author and helped start Rolling Stone magazine. But in her off days, she was a street prostitute. And her willingness to tell her truth to me gave me the courage and the experience of truth. Truth is an experience. And like you're saying, when we can share honestly with our children, then we're modeling for them how to be honest and vulnerable themselves. And I don't know, I'm also a student of death. And the thing that I hear, because that's where we're all going right at the end, is the most important thing isn't how much money you have in the bank or how much you worked. Very few people are on their deathbed saying, I wish I worked more. I have more success, right? It's the people that you love and the lives that you've changed and how you've been changed by other people. And it's the truth and that vulnerable, authentic connection that you were describing. Mm-hmm. That's really what we're doing here. That's not success or failure model. It's really about, for me, depth and surfaceness. That's a word.
You know, the person who inspired me to write my fourth book, which is the self-help book, she was 42 when I talked to her, and she said to me after a number of discussions, she said to me, "You're the first person in the world who's listened to me and accepted me for who I am."
Mm.
And that was so healing for her, to have somebody at the age of 42, have somebody accept her for who she was.
Yeah.
Very powerful, that truth.
Yeah, it is. And in accepting, whether we accept ourselves or come to our own truth first and then bring that to others, or whether we bring it to others and then come to accept within ourselves, it is our shared humanity and that recognition of the uniqueness of each person. And I think what's scary as parents, and I have one child that presents pretty middle of the road, and then I have another one who's way off here on a bunch of different spectrums of things. And there's concern, we want our children to be successful in the world, right? And wanting to like, oh, can we shave off those edges of that thing that make other people uncomfortable, or that maybe will make you less palatable in certain circumstances. And we went to special schools and we did lots of different things. And the thing, because I've had a very twisted path in my life that I feel really grateful that I was able to share with him, is that there's a wrench for every nut, and there's a place for you in this world.
Yep.
And he has found it. Actually, at 20 years old, he has found that place, at least for where he is right now, in this really special, funky little college that he's in. And so I feel so grateful that I was able to do for him what wasn't done for me in that uniqueness, because I ended up in the work I do, this very, cutting edge there. My parents would roll in their grave if they knew what I did for a living. But being able to be present and hold our own fears, manage our own truths. That's some of the truth over harmony, is like, this child is this way. And that might make me feel disharmonious because it's inconvenient, or it's difficult, or it's challenging, or it's so outside my comfort zone, it freaks me out. That's some of the truth over harmony, just internally as parents, to navigate, that really causes us to grow. It certainly has for me.
Yes. Yeah. One of the things that you said about, our current system talks about, helping our children be successful. Really, the goal for education should be to make all of our children positive contributors to society. And that's a truth that a lot of people ignore. And it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody needs to be financially successful. They just need to not detract from society. They need to contribute to society in some form or fashion. And we should honor that contribution. I love the communes that they have in Scandinavia, where various people live together, homeless people, disabled people live together, and they all contribute in one way. Some cook, some go to work, some clean. They do what they can, and they contribute. But that's a truth that's going to take a long time to get through society, I think.
Well, I mean, I do believe that as a species, we're on an evolutionary path. And
Yes.
And I do believe that, it actually shows in many, many scales that we're on a positive trajectory, that most people in the world are living a better circumstance with more food and better shelter. Slavery is illegal in most places, and lots of other terrible things that were just normal 1,000 years ago are no longer accepted, right? And so there's women can vote. I can own property. Like there's a lot of stuff that's happened even recently that like, so we are on a positive trajectory, and there was this tribal experience, the village experience, which I think is the most healthy for humans, is to have this community where we all have something that we give. Not that there wasn't lazy and ne'er-do-well people in tribal culture, I'm quite sure, but because dysfunction didn't get made up in the modern world, I'm sure. But there are these, I think, pendulum swings that we have. And it's very interesting for me that one of the great gifts of the last few years in the pandemic, particularly, is this connectedness internationally through Zoom. We're on different continents right now. Right. And it's a normal, and we both grew up before the internet. So there's, we remember when you couldn't do this, we'd be faxing to each other at 7-Eleven or something to try to talk to each other. So there is always there's kind of light and shadow in all things. And this yearning, the kind of existential loneliness and disconnection and inauthenticity that is pervasive on some levels actually creates the dissonance that it creates, the suffering even that it creates, I think actually holds the seeds of the solutions and the next evolutionary force. That's why we're having this conversation, right? There's a whole shift. To talk about parenting in this way was unheard of in the 1950s. This wasn't.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
My motivation is to, help young parents to be more prepared than my parents were. To help their children. And, you look at the research about money spent in different age groups, and the money spent from 0 to 5 is the most powerful investment that you can make in helping young children to be confident about who they are before they get into the school system, and to be socialized before they get into the school system. It's so important that the statistics, I don't know if you've seen them, but it reduces crime rates, it reduces, health, it increases health. It's the biggest impact that you can make as an investment in your newborn children. Because
really, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Whether you know it or not, they understand everything that you're saying as soon as they're born. Yeah. They just can't communicate it yet.
Well, I mean, I'm sure we can all just think about what we know about our parents that never shall be named, because no one knows us more intimately than our children, and whether those truths are stated or not, right? And I think the best thing we can do to build whole and confident and happy children is to love them for who they are, and to be able to grow ourselves, to be able to both tell and share and make a space for different people's perspectives, their own truth, whether it's intellectual or emotional or physical, and to be able to allow disharmony and truth as the guiding force that will again reform itself into a new kind of harmony. I think that's kind of the cycle of what happens in truth, is that it may rock the boat, but then the boat can get set on a slightly different course and come back into balance, incorporating this new truth, whatever that might be.
Yes. And what you said about your son is very important for all parents to realize, is that maybe I'm not the right person. I need to find a coach who can help one of my children that I can't help. And to have that humility to do that is very important. And it's very strong, as you said about your son, finding the right person to help them.
Well, I think, I heard this a long time ago, that children really need to bond with one person. And I see it with my clients. Many of my clients, I work spiritually with people and connect them with aspects of divinity, of nature, often of ancestry. And many times what people will connect with as a loving force is a grandparent or an uncle who may be passed now, that was the one person who loved them no matter what. And it may be a coach, it may be, but if we can provide our child with one place where they feel truly loved and accepted, even if that doesn't come from us, that's really what we need. And if you didn't get it, like I didn't get it as a kid, I got it as an adult, and it still works. We have lots of resilience here to come into that in our own truth. Yeah.
Yes.
Shawn, so beautiful to talk to you about these wonderful topics. And this is the first of a 10-part series on the 10 priorities of child rearing. And we'll list them in the show notes. And we'll meet again soon for number 2.
Yes,
read
thank
number 2 to us so that we have the
you.
topic.
Number 2 is principles over rules.
Nice.
Yeah.
And so I look forward to speaking with you again, Shawn.
Thank you, Renee.